We're at the home of Dr. Marshall Jenkins, author of Intellectually Persecuted. And Doc, I'm looking at your wall of fame there.
My inspiration was actually to send a message out, not so much about me, but about the experiences that I had. And the book is very much about everyone. I have things in this book which I think everyone needs to understand. I realize this probably would be the only book that I'll ever write, primarily because of my age, and I'm realistic about that, although I'm in good health right now. I will be 87.
Wow.
January 30th.
January 30th?
Yeah.
What year were you born?
26.
Okay.
1926.
Okay.
And I wanted to write a book based on the experiences that I had. Many of them were not very pleasant because of the job that I was assigned to do. The story begins before I was born. The story begins in Americus, Georgia. My grandmother had 7 children. My mother was one of them. At this point, my mother was only 6 years old. But she decided to take her children to a parade in Americus, Georgia. That's where we're all from. And the strangest thing happened at that particular parade. A black man was lynched and drugged through the street, the same street that the parade was on. And it was such a horrifying experience for my grandmother and her children that it was at that point that she decided she was going to leave the South, Americus, Georgia, and move to Hartford, Connecticut. Now, I was born in Hartford, Connecticut. That was a period of time that I knew nothing about the separation of races, how much hatred people had concerning black people. Mm-hmm. We were free of that as children. It was during the Depression. We didn't have much, but we were able to live a life free of fear. But the strangest thing happened to me. When I became 18, the World War II was going on, and I was drafted. And I was drafted in Hartford, Connecticut. I'd recently graduated from high school. And the interesting thing is, 2 weeks after I was drafted in Hartford, Connecticut, I was in Alabama. And no one gave me any information about the South as opposed to the North. And all of a sudden, I'm in Anniston, Alabama, a soldier wearing the uniform. And I see the signs white on drinking fountains and everywhere else. Blacks could not use the drinking fountain or many other things. And I was horrified as an 18-year-old kid because I didn't know what to do. And this is explained in my book, that I could have been just as a young man whose name was Till, lived in Chicago, and he went to visit his mother in the South. Hello? And the interesting thing is, he had an argument with a young white girl in a store that he went into. And he didn't know the difference either. So he simply said what he would normally say in Chicago in this argument. And that night, the Ku Klux Klan went to his grandmother's house where he was visiting, and they lynched him. So I knew about that story, and so the fear that I had was just abnormal.
Okay, you've in your book,
Right.
there's reference to a poem and a song
Yes.
called
The Lost Chord.
"The Lost Chord."
Right. Written by an Englishman.
What is the significance?
The significance, this was done by Arthur Sullivan. His name is Arthur Sullivan. He was knighted, in fact. He was from England. The point of that particular song is that every human being experiences the lost chord. And that song and poem simply indicates that there are periods of time in our lives when we simply can't get it together. And rather than to do anything that's wrong, you have to just live through it and analyze your situation so that you will see what he sought in that song. He said, "Seated one day at the organ, I was weary and ill at ease, but my fingers wandered idly over the noisy keys. And eventually, he found the perfect chord on the piano. And he said it was like finding heaven, because he realized that he needed to find himself rather than to just do anything that was stupid." And that particular song indicates that everybody at times have a lost chord, and they need to seek that chord and seek the correction of that chord. And if they seek it and find it, it's like finding heaven on earth. And that is what I feel everybody experiences.
How are you, sir?
I'm good.
And who is that, Doc?
My grandson.
Okay, and what is his name?
Keenan.
Keenan, how old are you?
I'm 16.
And where are you going to school?
Public High School.
Okay, what grade are you? Senior or
No, I'm a junior.
junior? I want to ask you about the dream chapter
Right.
in your book.
The dream chapter, to me, is perhaps, if not the most significant chapter, it's one of them. I dreamed that I came to the United States of America on a slave ship. And I experienced exactly what slaves experience, especially young slaves. And I dramatize it in my book. I explain what really happened. And I researched it, and I referenced others who had written about it in my book. That dream was so real. I learned that I was all right in terms of being fed, because the white owners make sure that you are fed because they want you to be well and able to go to work at age 8. Mm-hmm. And I always dreaded in the dream becoming 8 years old, even though I had come to the United States on a slave ship. I didn't know really what to expect, but what I observed was simply a horrible situation for those who were 8 years old into adulthood. And that's what I wanted to avoid. And I explained in the book a number of things that happened to young slaves. It's a dynamic chapter, and I want everybody to read it. But That also says that it was not only about me.
Junior, where do we want to go to college?
Florida State.
Excuse me?
Florida State.
Florida State. What are you going to major in?
Probably biology or chemistry.
Coming from that ugliness,
Right.
okay, because and which is obviously inspired you, giving you the drive to sit down and actually put this in words.
Right.
What is the legacy? Is there anything positive that can come out of this?
Oh, yes.
Going into the future.
There's more about being positive in my book.
Out of all that darkness.
Yes, than negative. First of all, I was brought up in the church. And I realized that God determines everything about us from the time that we're born until the time that we die. And my whole effort throughout this book is to make sure that I not only decide but accomplish the things that I want to accomplish in terms of education. And once I receive the education, I wanted to give back, especially to young people. And there were a number of experiences that I had. Many were very positive. For an example, I became a teacher, and later I became the first black appointed high school principal in the state of Connecticut, in Lebanon, Connecticut. And the interesting thing about that, for 7 years I was the principal, and we were the only black folk in the entire town.